All right. Hey everyone. So I don't know if you noticed, but I posted the lecture and then realized there's no sound. Honestly, I don't know why. Cause always check the sound in the beginning. Like I don't check the sound from the recording, but like I check the sound in the um, mic icon in Zoom meeting. So I have to redo all the lecture today, which is frustrating for me. But and then sorry for those who were waiting for it on time. But I would have to do it again. Hopefully, I'll be able to give you a better or like refined version of it because I rehearsed. But let's try this again. So today, what I'm going to do is to show you um, basically like me live coding a Node.js application, server side programming. So this is kind of like a counterpart of what we did last um, last Tuesday or the week before. Um, like we basically did like Ajax code, but we're gonna um, today write a simple Node.js applications. Okay, so let's not get frustrated, and then create a new window for editor. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a folder, open. So this was the demo that I did in the last lecture, but I'm gonna create a new one. April 7th, demo 2. Okay, so okay, so this is a new folder that I created, and then what I'm gonna do is to actually find create a Node.js application. I'm gonna actually follow the tutorial that I give you in the assignment 4, which is basically creating a simple static file server. So what do I mean by static file server? It's like it's I'm creating a web server that is going to um, respond to the file request, and whenever a client machine or web browser requests for files inside the server, it's going to retrieve. I mean, it's going to fetch the file and then send the response to the client machine with a file, HTML file or JavaScript or image, any kind of thing. So I'm going to build a very, very, very simple Node.js server using this tutorial. So to be able to do that, I would have to go to that folder. Like this is basically what I've been doing in the previous lecture. Okay, okay, so now I have nothing at all in this folder. So let me actually show you in the Finder. So this one has nothing. So what I'm gonna do is create like initialize the folder to be a node project. So npm init-y is going to do the job. So -y is basically doing, like, if you don't have -y, it's going to keep asking information for name, version, description, and so forth. But basically what I'm doing here is to automatically generate these information by saying adding -y at the end. And then I would have to install Express, which is going to add this module inside package.json, which is basically specifying all the library that like the current project depends on. So Express is there, but also now the folder has the project folder has a folder called Node module, and then it automatically install all the packages that we need to be able to run Express. So Express is there, but then probably Express requires a bunch of other packages, and then a bunch of other packages will require other kinds of packages. So it just basically install everything that we need. Okay, so that's that. And then I'm just going to copy this thing inside this. Oh, so we would have to create a index.js. The reason why I name it index.js is only because here it says main JS function is index.js. But you can name it however you want it. Oops. Okay, so now what I did is created a file like web server. I'm gonna use different ports. I think if I use 80, it's gonna be the default port where I don't have to specify the port number in the URL address. But let's try 8082 for a second. So this number could be probably anything between I don't exactly remember, like port available port numbers. So anything between 0 and 1023 is kind of reserved for the computer, and anything between 1024 to this number is available for you to use. Okay, so just for the sake of luck, let's use 3744. Okay, so let's run this guy. Okay, so how I run it, like I would have to call node and index.js, and then it's running this particular thing, and if I paste it here, it is running, but it does not know what to retrieve. It's basically the editor is looking for public folder, like any kind of files inside public folder. So let me create this public folder, and then maybe just let's create a demo.html, and then say hello world. So if I refresh, it's not going to work because I have to specify the file name. Yes, now it works. So if I change something here and then refresh, now it's going to retrieve the static files from the server. Now your machine is running a web server, and basically what you have to, like when you have a Linux web server, basically this is the same thing that you have to do. Like you run like a Node server-side program like this, and then if you know the URL, like the domain name of the server, if you type like the address of your server, and then this is going to be it's going to basically work for your Linux server if you have a Linux server. Okay, let me try 80 just for the sake of fun. So I think 80 is the default port number for HTTP request. And then let's see if it works. So 80, like, because default, like it, port number 80 is default number. You don't have to specify the port number. So, but that means that, I mean, typical like Linux, like any website that you use is going to wait for, like, you know, listen to any requests through this port number 80. But let's go back to 3744. Yes, okay. I'm a little bit out of my mind because of the frustration that I'm having regarding the lecture recording going bad, and then I get like a lot of notification from phone. My kids are playing outside, and so, like, you know, please bear in mind if there's something happens during the recording. Okay, which is one of the reasons why I record in the morning. So what am I supposed to do? So what I'm gonna do is actually bring boilerplate HTML code for demo.html. I'm just gonna copy from what I have in the beginning. So this is head. It's basically going to include Bootstrap, jQuery, Bootstrap main, like, you know, basically jQuery and Bootstrap. I'm gonna copy this guy for now, but let's start over. Maybe not. Okay. So here I have a very simple code. So I'm gonna show you how what it looks like. Oops. Cannot be reached because I just changed the port number. Okay, let's maybe have some space on the top. Okay, so this is basically a simple interactive web that I'm trying to create using this 2-button and input box, and I'm just trying to create a rock paper scissors game in using the Node.js server. So basically, if I type rock and then press get submit, the server is going to randomly pick one of rock paper scissors and send me back the response, so that we can kind of play this game. I don't know why I chose this example, but you know, let me actually turn off my phone. All right, so where was I? And I'm using this Bootstrap grid layout. Basically, it's just splitting the screen in 3-way, depending on the size. So if I resize it, it's gonna be responsive. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna do. So here, what I'm gonna do is create this JavaScript. Typically, I would insert an external JavaScript file, just for the sake of, you know, having HTML and JavaScript in the same file. I will just use script tag, and of course I will do document ready, D, and specify of function. It's not doing syntax highlighting, so let me actually check. Okay, now it's good. So let's do, hey, document is ready. Okay, so I'm gonna refresh the page. And you see that it's printing out the console message. So what do I want to do? Like, what do I want to do is actually create a click handler for this button. So let's try get. So I'm gonna use two Ajax call, get and post. So let's create a get Ajax call first. So to be able to do that, I would have to select this button and then create a click handler. Hashtag rps get dot click is equal to click, and then I would have to pass a function, event handler function, and then here let's just simply say get rps is clicked. RPS simply means that rock paper scissors. Okay, so saved it. If I click it, I get this nice console log message. And then what I'm gonna do is make an Ajax call to the server, and the URL should be, so I mean, the first of all, I would have to review the get function that we looked at. So if you recall, this particular site, get is Ajax function, and that takes four different parameter. Only the URL is the required one, and specify the URL that you wish to request. And then we're gonna use URL or the term called endpoint. So endpoint is basically it's basically URL that the server is going to respond to. So let's say, hey, RPS, and then because this is the only required URL, I should be able to do this. Let's try. Let's go back to the demo and refresh. If I click it, the button is clicked, but then the local host does not have this endpoint. So it has 404 not found status message, which is one of the I don't know if you remember this, like message 404 is not found, but there were a bunch of other status message. Like 200 is something that we're going to use a lot. Okay. 404 is something that is not available, but the other thing that we're going to check is 400 bad request, in case the client, like web browser, made a bad request. All right, so how do I make the server respond to this Ajax call? I would have to create an endpoint. So basically app is the instance coming from Express package, and it's going to deal with lots of like in general, like web routing and a lot of endpoints. The current endpoints that it can hold, it can deal with, is only the static files inside this public folder. So this means that, hey, I'm going to fetch any kind of file inside this public folder, and then respond to the clients or web browser. This is more specific, like folder inside public, but we don't exactly need this because we don't have any subfolder. So to be able to create a get endpoint, I would have to simply use app.get function. And then the first parameter is going to be the endpoint that we are responding to. So I'm going to say RPS. So this URL needs to match with this guy. And then second parameter of this get function is going to be the callback function, which is going to run whenever whenever the server get a request on this to this particular endpoint. And the default parameter of this callback function is request. Like there are two parameters. The first one is request, and the second one is response. Okay, so that is that. And then what do I do? Let's simply. So again, this is the second parameter, and I keep saying that in JavaScript function is an object, so you can pass as a parameter, and then the function passed as a parameter is called callback function. So here I'm just gonna say, hey, get RPS request received. This is the only thing that I'm gonna do in this callback function. And then because I changed something in the server, I would have to restart the server. Control C is going to stop the server, and then I'm running the new server. So let's go back, and if I press this button, hopefully the server is going to respond. Nope. Maybe. Why is that true? Okay, if I click it, RPS is not found. Well, it is supposed to. Let me actually check my cheat sheet. Oh, sorry. This is the URL that I have to. I guess I have to include this backslash in the URL or endpoint. So let me refresh, restart the server, restart the page. Clicking it is going to actually make the server-side program respond to this. Okay, so it is responding, but then you realize that the 404 message is gone, which I didn't really expect. But again, we're gonna come back to that. But basically, what I'm doing is that making a GET request to the server using this endpoint. So, and then you can do things like this. Basically, what this is relative URL. So it's gonna be combined with whatever server website, like web address that you are using. So let's try this again. Refresh, and then I'm getting the request. Let me check. Okay, so the reason why it does not work is that I think the server hangs at the moment. So what I'm going to do is actually send a simple response to the server, to the client machine. So like again, two parameters that are passed in the callback function is first thing is request, and the second thing is respond. So here I'm simply gonna say, hey, let's send some data. I got this. I received your request. So simple text message sending to the client machine. So let's restart the server. And now I got this all hanging responses when I quit the server. So let's start over. If I click it, I am sending, I got the request. Now I can make a multiple request, and then, like, you can see the server is not hanging and it's responding. Although I don't see any message, because although I mean, like it is sending some message, but here I don't see any message. It's because we don't have this callback function, and callback function is needed to be able to see the response that we got from the server. Okay, so let's create a callback function. If you go back to the slide, the second parameter of this get function is data that we can send, and then third is basically a function to run if the request succeeds, and it had like additional parameter, 3 parameters. So let's just follow this. Like the data, I'm gonna send null for now, because I don't need to send any data at this moment. And then I'm gonna send function. The first parameter is data. Second parameter is, I'm looking at this here, status. And then third parameter is XHR, is basically HTTP request object. And I'm gonna say simply object. Okay, so let's put a debugger here just to stop the program at this point. So and then like check out all the like parameters that I got from the server. So I saved it. I didn't change anything in the server, so I'm just gonna refresh the website. If I click it, now I got stopped at this debugger, so let me actually make it bigger just for the sake of see what's inside. And you can see, like, we can evaluate each parameter at this console. So data is actually the message that I typed in the server. So I received your request is basically what I'm sending here. So if I change this, hey, this worked. And then refresh the page, and then make a get request again. I'm gonna get this data, and then I'm gonna get this status, which is basically a success, and then some other object is gonna be the HTML request, XML HTML request object, which is going to have a bunch of information about this particular request. And I don't know if you remember this ready state. Ready state is basically this guy. I think it was presented in week -2. Basically, so like integer number that changes from 0 to 4. And then 4 indicates the response came back. Then there are other, like 0 means request not initialized, 1 means server connection established, and so forth. And then 4 is basically what we are looking for in general. All right, so that is now what we can do is we are getting data from the server. So how can we get more complex data? So let me check. Let's actually send more complex data. hey, data is equal to hello, or let's just use key value pair. Key one is going to be value 1, and key value 2 is going to be value 2. So let's see if it works. So if I request, and then it is actually sending the data. So data, it's basically, you get the JavaScript object, right? So type of data is object. So you might be wondering why it works, like, because like last time I told you that we have to serialize all the data that is sending, like serialize meaning that changing the object, like, JavaScript object into string. Basically, like, Express server is going to deal with automatically detects the type of its type of the data that we're sending, and then if it's JavaScript object, it's just going to automatically serialize using this JSON object, JSON, notation. So what I was gonna do is, so okay, now the server can send data, which is basically, in assignment 4, this is what you need, like, to fetch task. Like, you are going to make a get request to server, and the server is going to respond with like task that is available from the database, and then you can use the same kind of JavaScript object that we used to have in assignment 3. Okay, so what if I want to send some sort of data? Like, let's try to send some data. So here, I'm sending null, but let me actually send something like, again, JavaScript objects. So my first name is Sang, and my last name is Lee. Actually, my first name is Sang1. So how does the server will receive this thing? In get, remember, like, the like the parameter, the data will be passed as URL parameters. So query, so it's gonna be something like this, guys, like, question mark, and you can specify key value pair, like this is key and this is value, and then whatever I'm sending here is going to be received as the URL string. Or like actually here, this is the object that I'm sending, but the other way to send is simply like just expand the URL with this query string. Let's say gender is equal to male. So let's see how the server can get the data. So you can get the data from the request object, and the request object is going to have a property called per query, and then it's going to have anything that is passed from the client machine. So this is just for get, and then for post method we're going to use something else called body, but we're going to come back to that later. So let's just print out this query string that it gets from the client. So saved it, refresh the page, refresh the server, refresh the page. I don't have any errors, but basically it's sending three different data using this data parameter, which is the second parameter of this get function. And also I specify one more data point, like query string, inside this URL. So if I make a request, let's look at the server, and then I get this nice data object, and it has all three different data that it was sending from either URL parameters and also from the get functions. Okay, so this is pretty useful. So what I'm going to do is, send whatever that is typed inside this input function, like here, because I'm kind of sending rock, paper, scissors, or one of the rock, paper, scissors. And one of the things that you have to notice is that, like, server-side program, they cannot trust any kind of data coming from website, because basically it can send any kind of data, and then who knows, it may be a malicious program who's trying to add, like, garbage data inside your database. You would have to validate any kind of data that is coming from the web browser, and then make sure that it comply with your database schema that you're designing and so forth. So here I'm just sending random data, but like what I'm gonna do is, hey, I'm going to send my choice, which is basically whatever that is typed inside this input form. So I'm gonna say, hey, I'm gonna get this input box and send the value as data, and I'm gonna simply print out the data that is it gets from the server. Okay, and let's check it out. Restart the server. Well, we didn't have to restart the server, but I'm gonna say, hey, I'm sending random text. And if I press get submit, I'm still sending the old one. So I'm gonna refresh. Now it has a new code. Hey, and then press get submit, and then server received this new JavaScript object that has choice and hey. So let's say server is expecting choice, like a JavaScript object that has choice, like a property. But then what if web browser sends something else? So you would have to, like, let me actually simulate an error. Like, let's say front end, if the developer made a typo in the project, like the property name, let's say something like this is the typo that this person made, and then if the server is randomly, like not randomly, but if server kind of assume this this choice property from the web browser, it's not going to work, because front end developer rate is mistakes. So let's print out this request query.choice. So if I submit, the nice thing is that I get the data object, but then I didn't get the property that that I was expecting, because the front end developer made a mistake in this property name. So here what I would have to do is rigorously check the sanity check, do the sanity check for all kinds of parameters. So let's say, hey, is like query is basically something that is available from the request, so you don't have to worry about it. But like I'm gonna say, hey, if choice is undefined, I'm gonna complain. So how do I complain? The way that I complain is going to respond the client machine with bad request. So I would have to write a slightly more complex response. So I would have to write header first, and then the first parameter of write head is simply like the status, and this is the code that we saw. This 400 is basically a bad request, and then say what kind of data that I'm going to send. The second parameter is option, and here I can specify kind of data that I'm going to respond with. So hey, I'm gonna say I'm gonna send text. So and then I'm gonna end the response. So end is kind of the send is basically sending a response in one take. But if you start to write a multiple write something inside response in multiple lines, end is the one that is going to send the response to the client machine. So here I'm going to specify the text message that I'm going to send to the client. Hey, choice is expected in RPS endpoint. This is kind of like an error message that I'm sending to the web browser, so that the front-end developer can get kind of information about the request that they're making. So if I do this, and then the other thing that I would have to do is I would have to return this callback function. I escape this callback function. The reason why I do this is that because I'm sending one response here, but if I don't return it, it's going to come down here, and then it's going to send another response. Basically you don't want to do anything with the data that is not correct. So obviously if you go to the server.js file that I provided for assignment 4, you're going to have any kind of endpoint handler is going to have a bunch of this if statement that does sanity check of all the parameters, and then it's going to return. All right, so let's test. So right now the client is sending wrong kind of incorrect data, and then it this server should respond with this bad request response. So let's run this again, and then go to demo. Hello. If I submit get request, it's going to print out the JavaScript object, but then it did not reach this part. So one thing is better to do is write down the message, the same message that I would give to the client, so that I know backend programmer knows from this console. So let me run it again, refresh, and then I can say the server is complaining that hey, choice is expected at RPS endpoint, and then even in the client side, it should have got a response that hey, you made a bad request, 400. So this is basically jQuery function that is going to print out, like, jQuery is going to automatically print out this bad request message whenever it gets, like, a response from the server that is that is error. Like, you got the request for, I mean, if there's no endpoint, you're gonna get 404, but here I got like 400, which is basically what I made in the server side program. So this could have been something else, like 401, even though it doesn't make sense. So 401, I don't remember what 401 was. 401 was unauthorized. So let's do this. Make a request. And then I got 401 type response, although we're supposed to send 400. So I'm gonna go back to 400. So what do I do? Like, the reason, I mean, the other thing is that like, this will be useful to actually see the response from the server to get, like, more information about the bad request. To do that, you would have to have a failure callback function. So I don't know if you remember in last week's Google presentation slide, I introduced how we can get failure callback. So the get function of jQuery get function, which is basically get Ajax call, is going to return an object that has promise interface, and promise interface have member function call that, like such as done, fail, then, and then all of these function is going to exactly return the same object, so you can do chainable callbacks. So this is, like, the return of this function is going to like, basically an object that you can call then function or done function or fail function. So this is like, chainable function call, where this is going to return an object that has member function of done, like member function done, and done function is going to return exactly the same object, so that you can call another function and then keep calling this function. So done is for success callback, fail is for failure callback. So I'm gonna use done and fail syntax. So here, this is basically our callback function, right? I'm gonna cut this callback function and then use it for done. And then I'm gonna call fail function, and then fail function will have 3 default objects. One of them, the first one is the XML, the request object, XML HTTP request. I don't know what the other two are, but I can search for it definitely. jQuery Ajax call fail function handler. Get function. So fail. So it's going to obviously none of them is required function. So fail, it can have 3 different parameters. First one is like jQuery version of XML HTTP request, and text status and arrow thrown. So let's just grab these 3 things. and then just put a debugger, and then get rid of this guy. So again, what the server is doing is it's gonna send 400 bad requests. The reason why it is sending 400 bad requests is that it is expecting choice property in the query, but then the client is not sending the choice property. It has a typo. So let's put a debugger and then see what kind of data that we get. Okay, so I'm gonna type something and then get request. Oh, I would have to refresh the page. Now it got stopped at this fail function. And then let's see what we have. JQXHR is basically, you know, the XML HTTP request object for jQuery. And it has a bunch of things, like bunch of properties. Let's look at the text status. Text status simply says error. Error thrown is unauthorized. Oh, did I not refresh the server? Okay. If I refresh the server, if I do it again, I should get bad request. Alright, so what happens to the message that I sent? Like here in the server.js, on the server program, I was sending this text message. It is actually available as part of response text of the object, like, you know, the XML HTTP request. So jQuery object and has a property called response text, and this is the one that includes the message that we are sending. All right, so what do I do? Like, you know, just for the sake of, you know, development, like you would like to print out this message. So here, instead of debugger, I'm going to say console.log jqxhr.response text, which is going to print out the error message that you're getting. So for your assignment 4, I recommend you to write down the failure callback for every get and post Ajax code that you're making, even though it's going to, you know, write down all the message for you, like in this like server-side programming, like server-side terminal. It would be nice to have something on the console as well. So let's try that. And then here I'm printing out this like message. The other thing that, like, you know, like other good practice is that because it's like error, instead of console.log, console has a function called error, because this is error message, right? If I do that, it's going to print out differently, you know, like with this red text, and then you can see where it's coming from, and then you have this nice icon in the beginning, and you're gonna have this nice badge icon for console that we have two different error. One is generated by jQuery by default, and this is the one that we are printing out from this failure callback function. And then you can see in the source code where it is sending the error. Okay, so the thing that I wanted to do is still rock paper scissors. So let's send write data. So let's say choice, and then hopefully it's not going to complain anymore. So it's not complaining anymore. Like, let me show you again. So if I do it again, it's not complaining anything, but that it should complain, because like what I was supposed to send is rock, paper, or scissors, not anything other than that. So here in the server-side programming, I will create another gatekeeper, probably after we know that, you know, choice is defined, and let's say I'm gonna create a function, and variable called choice. It's basically request.query.choice, and then because I know choice exists, now I'm gonna check if this belongs to rock. If this is not rock, and if this is not paper, and if this is not scissors, I'm gonna complain about, hey, you need to pick one of rock, paper, scissors, or scissors. You need to send. So this is the error message that I'm gonna type, and then I'm gonna send the bad request to and then here. So let's basically test this guy. So I'm gonna restart the server because I changed the server, and then refresh the page, and I'm gonna type random thing, and then if I send the request, it's gonna complain, hey, you need to send rock, paper, or scissors. So let's see if it does not complain if I send rock. It's not complaining. If I have one space at the end, it's gonna complain. What if I send lowercase rock? It's gonna complain, and so forth. So maybe this is too strict. Maybe you want to release like a little bit, like so that it could take lowercase string and it could have some space in it. Maybe by trimming it, it's going to allow like some space in the beginning or at the end, and then maybe we have lowercase. So string, JavaScript string has a member function called to lowercase. So I'm gonna do this guy. Basically, this is chainable call, like function call, where trim is going to send a string, and then I can, because this is like a string again, and string has member function called to lowercase, I'm going to call this function right after this. So here I'm going to say rock, paper, scissors, because this has to be lowercase. Refresh the server program and refresh the page. Now it's not going to complain about space at the end, but it's going to complain about typo, and it's not going to complain about lowercase or even uppercase, because it's going to make the whole whatever string to lowercase. And scissors. So that's another sanity check for the server-side programming, and then we want to be able to actually send data to the client. So we would have to randomly pick rock, paper, scissors. So I'm going to create an array. Let array become rock, paper, and scissors. And then pick random element inside this array. So hey, if this function reach this point, it means that all the parameters are correct. although like we are only expecting one parameter. Now I can do something and send some data. So here, let's say server choice is gonna be one of this array from one of the element in this array. Let's say just always send rock, because I don't know, server decided to do this, strategy of sending always rock, although it's gonna be obvious. So here I would have to restart the server, and then I'm gonna send rock, and then it's sending this okay, so I have some typo. Server choice is sending rock all the time, so I can kind of guess, hey, it's always going to send rocks, and then I'm going to send paper, and then I'm going to win, so what do I do to make it random choice? So I would have to pick, like, this is index, and then if I can randomly pick either 0 or 1 or 2, I'm going to be able to pick random elements out of this array. So let's look up how to create random integer JavaScript. And then JavaScript has a object called math, and math has a bunch of useful functions for us. So random is one of them, but like that has, round, power, square root, absolute, ceiling, floor, sine, cosine, mean, max, and so forth. A lot of different things. Okay, but what I'm gonna do is use the math.random, and it returns a random number between 0 and 1. So it's not exactly what we want, but we should be able to get random integer by multiplying some integer, and then floor, get rid of like all the digit, like decimal number part from that number. So like math random times 10 is going to return something between 0, like some real number, like all real number between 0 and 10 exclusive. So if we floor this number, it's going to actually have random integer from 0 and 9. So I'm just going to grab this. So instead of 0, I'm going to do this. And then instead of 10, well, you need 3 because we just want 0 and 1 and 2. So let's see. I'm going to restart the server. Refresh the page. Oops, there's something wrong. There's a semicolon coming from the copied code. Saved it. Restart the server. Refresh the page, and I'm gonna send the rock, and it's sending scissors, rock, scissors, rock, scissors, rock, paper, rock. And so it's going to randomly pick one of the elements. It looks like it's not sending too many paper, or it does send a lot of papers now. Okay, so it's basically a random number that we get. So what do we want to do with this? We actually want to print out something here. So hey, let's create some div element, like this is the div element that I created, and then whenever I get the data, I'm gonna just add this text. So text is getting the content, the text content inside this div, and then this is actually getter and setter as well. So I'm going to set the data dot server choice. So I'm expecting server choice. Although it might be nice to check if server choice exists here, just for the sake of like not trusting the server, you know. All right, so let's try this out. So I'm gonna send rock, then I got paper, paper again, paper again. Oops. Sorry, I got distracted with something. So you see that, like, you know, I'm getting random, you know, response from the server. So I'm kind of doing rock paper scissors game. Like, in, well, obviously it's not going to evaluate who wins, but you can see who wins. If I send paper, it send rock, I win. And I'm gonna send paper again. It's rock again, I win. This time I'm gonna send scissors, paper, and so forth. Okay, so this is very, I don't know, simple, stupid, interactive app. We haven't done anything about the post. Like, I'm gonna simply do post again. So I'm gonna create this, copy this thing and paste it here. Here, I'm going to add a click handler for post button, RPS post. Here, like, you know, and then instead of get method, I'm going to post, use post AJAX call. And it's basically gonna do the same thing. And let's see if it works. So I'm gonna refresh the page. I'm gonna say rock and post. It's not gonna say not found, cannot post. Why? It is because the server does not know how to deal with this RPS endpoint, like get post request of this particular endpoint. It only knows how to deal with get. So you would have to specify another one. Instead of get, you would have to use post. And then because this is post, the data is not coming from query string. It's gonna come as part of body, request body. It's just like the keyword that you have to use. And basically all the other things are exactly the same. And let's see if it works. Now I restarted the server, refresh the page. If I press the post submit, it is sending lots of error message. 500, which is so I cannot read property choice of undefined. Okay, so I forgot one thing. The one thing that I forgot is I would have to deal with encoding the data that is coming from the client machine. So Express has a nice middleware that is going to deal with, like, you know, parsing, like, you know, that's so basically I told you that you have to serialize data, and then get is automatic, like, because, you know, get is going to be anyway, it's going to be a URL parameter, and the URL parameter, only URL parameter that you can specify is in a string. But here you would have to have a parser to be able to get the data from the client machine. So Express has a nice middleware called URL encoded. So I'm just gonna copy the code that I have. So this is basically something that I need to be able to actually get the data. And what does it do? Like URL encoded, it's kind of like it's taking care of like parsing and serialization. And probably you don't have to know too much of a detail, but like you just need to know that you need this like in a particular uh, middleware, and then like I pasted the nice Stack Overflow page that explains what these are. So hey, what are express.json or express.url encoded? Like one of the answer was really great. So express.url encoded is a method, built-in method in Express to recognize the incoming request object as strings or arrays. This method is called as a middleware in your application using the code. And then here it even says you do not use these sort of thing for get or delete. You're gonna need these for post and put. Oops, sorry. Post and put. So I'm gonna leave this URL inside the code, and then I'm gonna post this code to the canvas. Hopefully you'll be able to see this, like read this particular post. So I added this, like, I added this, and then I'm gonna restart the server. So like before it was not working, and you can see that like the received data was undefined. I'm gonna rerun it again, and then rerun the page. If I post something, now it got something from the client. Now, like, compared to, it was not able to parse the data because, like, because of the lack of middleware, like, it was not able to send the data as a string. Now it like take care of like all the like string. I mean like the object that the client server like client machine is sending, and obviously it's nothing. So that's why the server is complaining. But if I send rock, it should basically work exactly the same. Okay, so I think that is that for that is like a simple interactive app that I created just for the sake of explaining the Node.js like server-side program, and then what you have to do for the assignment 4 is to actually parse, like kind of comprehend the server.js like file that I posted, and then it's very similar. Let me just briefly give you some ideas. So I'm gonna give you a high-level structure. So you see there's a server that is listening to any request in this particular port, and then in terms of endpoint, it has 4 endpoints. One is new task. It has supposed to be post method. Update task is supposed to be post method. Because these 3 are writing something in the database. This is getting something from the database. So I use get method for fetch task and post method for the other 3. And then I have some helper function for you. Like insert document is something that's going to add document to the database. Update one document is updating the document. Document is basically a task in this collection, like task collection. Retrieve all doc list is something that retrieves all the tasks that are available in the database. And then I have this nice helper function that is going to write OK response, and then bad request response. So basically what it does is it's going to send data to the client machine. So basically what we have done here, here or here, is basically done in this helper function, and then you can write down like this helper function is it's going to print out the console message in your terminal for the server side development, and then you can see how it complains, like how the server complains about the data. So if this is successful response, this is bad request response, and it is sending 200 response, and it's sending 400 response, which is bad request. And then like all the endpoint handler is going to use these helper functions, like not only these two, but also writing this thing. So fetch task, basically it does not expect any data because it's basically sending all the tasks available, and then it's using this retrieve all doc list, which is the helper function that I created. The first parameter is database handle query, and we're going to only send the task items that deleted is equal to false, because like if it's true, it means that it is something deleted by the users. And then we're going to send only these 5 fields or 6 fields, underscore ID, which is like a key of a task item that you're going to need to update the task later. Title, note completed, complete date, due date, and yeah. And then the last parameter is going to be sorted, like sorting option. It's going to sort by created date. If it's -1, it's going to sort by in descending order, I think. And then this is going to return the cursor to the database, and then you change it to array. And then once you get an array, you get this callback function. If there's any error, you're gonna send bad request response. If you got right data, you're gonna send docs. So here you have to keep track of this docs. Like basically docs is the array that you got from the list. And then if you go to OK response function, the third parameter is data that you're sending as part of one object, and this is the data that you're sending. So what you have to do is gonna be in your server client side program, like inside the success callback function, like this is the client side. So this is success callback function, and then first thing is data, and then you should expect to have data dot what do we have? Data dot status, data dot message, and data dot data. Okay, so it's not a ideal parameter name, so but like you should expect data dot status, data dot message, and the data dot data. Okay, so that was fetch task. Then this is fetching task from the client, like fetching task from the server to client machine. So this is another one. Again, like because it's post, it's going to expect something from request of body, and it task object is going to do sanity check for what it is expecting. But this is basically what you need to understand to be able to know, hey, what kind of data do I have to send to this endpoint? Basically an object that has title property, and also due date, and also note. And these are the only 3 properties that it is expecting. and then the rest of the data will be you know like completed by the server, because like um, any kind of task that is created, like completed, should be false. Any kind of data, like any kind of task, like you should have complete date null. Create date should be like client does not need to worry about created date, because every client machine will have like a different clock, and you want like a same kind of uh, clock in the server. And then delete is equal to false. Once you fill out this task object, you're going to send this to helper function, which is insert document. Insert document is going to have 4 different parameters. First one is DB database handle. Second one is collection name. Third one is data that we want to insert, and then last one is callback function that is going to be executed when the insert document is successfully added. So here, the last thing is like pretty interesting, because like if you go to insert document, it has 4 parameters: DB, collection name, data, callback, and then it's going to use this Mongo database driver to add this this particular data. And then once it inserts the document, it's going to call it has its own callback function. And if the force parameter is specified, it's going to call back this function with data. And then this callback is basically this guy, and it is expecting data, and it is going to send the ID of the inserted task item. So it's kind of more or less the same for updated task and like fetch, delete task. Basically what you need to know is what kind of data that server is expecting. So here, delete task is expecting underscore ID. So you would have to send a JavaScript object that has underscore ID as its property. Updated task is going to expect the JavaScript object that has 2 property. One is underscore ID, the other is data, and data is basically going to be another JavaScript object. So here, task data is request.body.data, and then it is supposed to be an object, something look like this. Depending on what you want to update, sometimes you want to only send title, sometimes you want to send all 3 of them, sometimes you want to use complete and completed date. But like here, I'm checking whether this the object data that is passed by the client, like the web browser, is going to contain what we are expecting. So if it sends anything else, it's going to complain. So let's say you're gonna, if you have some typo, let's say typo like this, it's going to complain, hey, I'm expecting complete date instead of this guy. And then it does a bunch of sanity check for each field. Like if title exists, I'm going to check if this title is going to be string, and so forth. So lots of string, lots of sanity check. Task completed is supposed to be Boolean, but when it receives it, it's going to come as a string value, because JSON cannot, JSON notation is basically string, but it cannot distinguish whether it is true, it is a string, or Boolean. And it's gonna check the due date. And yeah. So once it finish all the sanity check of the data, it's going to call this helper function, update one document. Requires 5 different elements: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So the first one is DB handle, second one is name of the collection, third one is the ID of the task item that you want to update. The fourth one is the task data that you are sending from the client that you want to update, and then last one is callback function. And then if you go to update one document, basically I'm kind of like providing a helper function so that you don't have to worry about the MongoDB database driver functions. But what it does is basically adding updating this particular collection with this query, and then I'm gonna set this with these new values, and once it's done it has its own callback function, and if I had callback function I'm gonna call this callback function with error. If not, I'm gonna call this callback function without this error, so that if you go back to callback function, here it is expecting error as a parameter. If error is not if there's something in error, which means that error is not undefined, it's going to write bad request. Otherwise, it's going to write OK response. Okay, so I think that is everything that I wanted to cover today. I created a quiz that is supposed to be helpful for you to do assignment 4, and I made the quiz allow multiple 2 attempts. Basically everything is true or false questions, so you can get full credit basically, but the purpose of the quiz is for you to think about the server.js file, and then and comprehend the server.js, and then hopefully it's going to be useful for your assignment 4. Okay, I think that's about it. So I post this files already from the previous lecture recording, but I'm gonna post it again because it looks, to me at least, it looks cleaner. So it's going to be available in Canvas, and I am recording this in 2 different ways, using QuickTime Player, and as well as the Zoom recording. So hopefully this time I will get sound recorded. So again, I think I went over time, and then I think I told you in the announcement already, but basically either I'm gonna skip the next Thursday lecture and replace with office hours, or maybe just post a shorter one if I feel like I need to explain more on the assignment. Okay, so I think that's it for today. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for being patient about waiting. Thank you for waiting for the next another lecture recording. Hopefully this time it'll work. It should work, and I'll see you next week or this Thursday. Thank you.